So you're moving to North Carolina, but you're trying to figure it out. Charlotte, Raleigh, where should you move to? What city is best for you? Well, in this video today, we are going to be talking about everything Charlotte and Raleigh and giving a comparison so you can hopefully make a better, more educated choice. If you're looking for everything Charlotte, North Carolina and the surrounding areas, we are here for you and you have come to the right channel. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date on everything you didn't know you needed to know. And if you hit that little notification button, you'll be the first to be notified when a new video pops up. I'm Kayla Lindsay. I am a local real estate agent of the Charlotte area, and every day I get calls, texts, emails, you name it, from people just like you looking to move to the area. Well, whether it's 9 days or 90 days or 900 days before you're moving to Charlotte, go ahead, reach out via text, email, or even go ahead and schedule a Zoom, and I'd be happy to talk you through exactly what you need to do to prepare for your move to Charlotte. So let's dive into our video for today. What in the world, where should I go, Charlotte or Raleigh? Well, a little bit of history on me. I actually lived in Raleigh for 6 years and know a little bit about Raleigh and the surrounding areas. Now, while I've been in Charlotte for 12 years, a lot of what my knowledge is of Raleigh is firsthand, and I made sure to pull up some stats for you guys. So let's talk about the overarching feel of both of these locations. Now, the first thing you're gonna notice, Raleigh, well, it's much smaller. Honestly, the population is way smaller and the demographics are a lot different. Raleigh has over a dozen colleges within a 60-minute drive from it. Now, that sounds kind of like, okay, yeah, maybe it's some local colleges. No, I'm talking Duke, Chapel Hill, NC State, Meredith College. All of these colleges and universities are very much centered in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill areas, which is also considered the Research Triangle. Now, what is the Research Triangle? Well, it is a huge collaboration, kind of think Silicon Valley, but on the East Coast. So we have a lot of businesses that have found their hub in this location. Therefore, it actually has provided quite a great deal of job opportunities. Now, while on the flip side, Charlotte has now had a ton of growth over the last couple of years. Huge corporations moving into town or on the outskirts. This has certainly helped quite a bit, especially we're already a big city and it's just growing even quicker. But it gives both of these areas some really nice draws. Now, the biggest limitation to Raleigh when it's talking about the Research Triangle, you need to be in those particular industries. Research, science, etc. If you're not in that, well, there might not be a job there for you, at least in that specific location. But what I can tell you is there are always job opportunities popping up in both cities. So let's talk a little bit about those demographics though. Raleigh, very much, because it has so many universities, not only is it a more transient, and when I say transient, I mean summertime comes and people go home, because there are over 100,000 students in a local area. I'm talking Chapel Hill, NC State, Duke, you name it. A lot of them go home for summer, or they travel, or when they graduate, they move away from this area, but there's always an influx of new people coming in. Now, this is not a knock to anybody that lives in Raleigh. Some of my good friends live in the Raleigh and local areas to that, such as Holly Springs. But what you have to understand is there can be competition for entry-level positions in Raleigh because there are so many students that are graduating and maybe want to stay local. So keep that in mind when you're looking into the Raleigh area from a job perspective. In addition, you do have a large population of people that are in that 20s kind of age range, right? A lot of college students are in the area. The cool thing is Raleigh is like a big little town. I know that sounds really funny, but it seems like everybody knows everybody. Those that live there and have made that their home in the long run, they truly do feel that. Now, funny part of Raleigh is just outside of Raleigh is an area called Cary. And many, many years ago, it was kind of dubbed the South New Yorker location. And I say that I am a New Yorker. It seemed like New Yorkers just seemed to flock to Cary, North Carolina. A lot of that had to do with the weather, the prices, everything really. A little bit slower, nicer, your money went farther, you name it. Now, as the popularity of Raleigh has grown, the population and the people that are moving there, the influx of people moving have also increased. So let's go back to Charlotte. What's the difference? Well, Charlotte does have a more, I would say, even-keeled age of population when you talk about demographics. So the demographics of Charlotte are far more even-keeled. We don't have a high population in or around Charlotte of universities. We do have the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. We also have some specialty schools such as Johnson and Wales and other schools of that nature. But those are more advanced type courses and more specific to those looking to go into a specific industry. So we don't have major universities where we have those lower age ranges that are just flocking to it. One is plenty. The cool thing is though, industry has grown across the board, whether you're in healthcare, in the sciences, in banking, which Charlotte is the second biggest banking capital in the United States. That's right, after 9/11, the banking industry basically said, okay, we do need another hub, and a lot of that came to Charlotte. So you will find there is a huge focus on banking in Charlotte and a lot of jobs that have to do with banking. And we also have a lot of corporate locations that are headed up right here in Charlotte. So when you're looking at both cities side by side, Charlotte is going to have far higher a population than Raleigh. So let's talk about the outskirt towns around Raleigh and the outskirt towns around Charlotte. Now, some of the outskirt towns such as Matthews and I'm going to say Mint Hill, even though it's kind of in the 485 belt, as well as Huntersville and Davidson and Gastonia and Rock Hill, South Carolina, because we're going to count that because it's an outskirt. Those towns are huge, and a lot of them are very similar to the size of Raleigh, just to kind of give you an idea of what the actual size is. For example, if you were to actually drive the full circumference of Charlotte, it would probably take you 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depends upon how fast you're going. Whereas Raleigh, you can drive the entire circumference in about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. It's very fast. They are very different sized locations. Now, positive with regards to Raleigh, again, there are always entry-level positions in businesses coming up, but there aren't as many corporations that have their headquarters in Raleigh. Part of that, well, it has to do with the actual size of the city. So when we go to the outskirts of Raleigh, we're looking at Zebulon, we're looking at Holly Springs, we're looking at, I'm going to count Chapel Hill because it actually is a small town. All of those towns, including Cary, those towns are much smaller. Here's the nice thing. They have started to grow because people are leaving Raleigh, and I'm not leaving in a bad way. They're moving away from Raleigh to get better prices, more property, better homes, newer homes, which means places like Holly Springs and Zebulon and Cary and really anywhere around Raleigh are starting to grow at a rapid pace. This gives you some really nice opportunities, not only from housing, but also shopping, jobs, etc. Because if you are getting in there now, you are going to be a part of that community as it's growing. And I have seen a ton of change happen in those areas. It's pretty incredible. So if we're looking at Charlotte, a lot of those outskirt communities are already very well established, which means sometimes there's a little bit more competition over housing or jobs, etc., because they're already more established. Which means if you want to get in a little bit earlier, if you want a little bit more space or you want that country feel, you've got to go even further out. Now, this isn't a bad thing. Both of these cities are absolutely fantastic, and I'm going to dive down into some of the numbers here, but I wanted to give you at least a contrast of what's really going on. Charlotte, huge. Raleigh, not as huge. Now, Raleigh is also the capital of North Carolina, so we have a lot of legislation there as well in politics, which is wonderful. Both of them, when we're kind of feeling the temperature of what they are, whether it's leaning more to the right or the left, honestly, they're both fairly even keeled, and I've seen there's a pretty even representation of both. However, in the last election, most did vote for the Democratic side, both in the Raleigh area and in the Charlotte area, so they do lean more to the left. Now, that's not a bad thing, whether you're on the left side or the right side, we're all in it together, but it does just give you a little bit of an idea of where the voting is and what's going on. Now, in the rest of the country, or should I say the state, which this happens quite a bit, usually the cities are going to lean more to the left, and more in the suburbs and the outskirts and more rural areas lean a little bit more to the right. You're going to see the same thing here in North Carolina. So those towns on the outskirts, such as Huntersville and Gastonia and things of that nature, they usually lean a little bit more to the right. You're also going to find that in Rock Hill and Fort Mill, South Carolina, they lean a little bit more to the right. Now you might be wondering, why am I including South Carolina? We're talking about North Carolina. Well, For this particular video, let's just pretend that Fort Mill and Rock Hill are all a part of North Carolina. They're not, they're South Carolina, but they are a huge piece of what makes Charlotte so amazing. So we're gonna keep it included. A lot of my clients that are moving here end up going right across the border into South Carolina because of the advantages, which we'll talk about in another video. So let's dive into the numbers. What do the numbers look like when living in both cities? Well, let's first start with what is the median home income? Based upon research, which I did just this morning to make sure I had updated numbers, the median household income or median household value or market price in Charlotte is $375. The interesting thing about this is Raleigh is $385. That's right, you heard that right. Raleigh, the smaller town, not Charlotte, is actually on average $10,000 higher on the median home value. Why is that? A lot of it has to do with higher demand because there's less available, right? Let's look at, obviously your scale here. If you have a higher demand, the prices are going to go higher because it's still a seller's market. Now, while Charlotte is also still a seller's market, there are more available homes for people because we have more space to build and create more. That's really the basis of it. Raleigh and in that area, they're very limited on space. There's not much that they can build until they go further outside of the city. So keep that in mind. So let's talk a little bit about the demographics. I mean, digging into the numbers. Charlotte has been dubbed a young professionals town. Why? There's a ton of job opportunities and the population is pretty focused in those under the age of 54. Now, I'm nearing my 40s and it sounds like it's right around the corner at this point, but the population in Charlotte, 58% are below the age of 54. Now, that says quite a bit about the population, of course, but the larger percentage is in that 25 to 40 range. So what does that mean? It's people that have already launched their careers or they're starting to get things going. And there's a whole lot of advance here in Charlotte because of the type of jobs that are available. So let's talk a little bit about what it's like to live in each of these locations. Now, as I said before, Charlotte is huge, especially compared to Raleigh. Of course, everything is within about a 30-minute drive in Charlotte. Everything is within about a 15-minute ride in Raleigh. So it really depends upon what kind of lifestyle do you have? What do you want? What I'll also tell you is there's more new construction properties if you're looking for a home here in Charlotte and the surrounding areas than there are in Raleigh. Here's a third piece, infrastructure. The infrastructure of Charlotte is far advanced to Raleigh. We have a trolley system, we have a train system. New Yorkers don't get too excited, it just goes north-south and there's only one line. But that's a big deal because we are the only city that has that in North Carolina. So we do have a train system. Our busing system is phenomenal. We have a lot of options when it comes to public transportation. But the other thing is we have taken the strides to hopefully, in most cases, get ahead of the population growth in building our roads. 485 additional byways that have already been approved. We're getting ahead of the population growth in Charlotte, which hopefully means we're not going to have a bottleneck. Now, what I can say in Raleigh, especially having lived there for so long, they are a little bit more limited on what they're doing with their roads. In addition, the roads that are going to get you fastest, they toll them. That's right. One of the biggest and what I would consider one of the best roads in Raleigh, which is going to get you very quickly down to Holly Springs and some of those, like I talked about, where people are starting to growth in their spread. Yeah, it's a toll road, which is kind of a bummer because it really is the fastest way to go and it saves you a lot of time. But a lot of people won't take it because they don't want to pay, which means what? All of the non-toll roads become completely backed up. Well, that was possibly what was going to happen on I-77 here in Charlotte. They made it optional. That's right, I-77 is still a non-tolled road if you don't want to be told what to do. So you have the option to take the double lane toll road and pay a toll to beat the traffic, or you can sit and just time your day appropriately. Sadly, they didn't do that in Raleigh, which means if you're going to live in that Holly Springs area or the lower quadrant underneath Raleigh, you're probably going to sit in a good bit of traffic unless you can plan in advance. So that is a little bit of a bummer where I would say Charlotte is a little bit better at that than Raleigh. But keep in mind, Charlotte's also bigger. So while a 15-minute ride turned into a 30-minute ride in Raleigh, yeah, it's still gonna be 30 minutes here, depending upon where you live and where you're commuting to. So now let's talk a little bit about what are some of the advantages of the actual location. We'll start with weather. Charlotte has pretty moderate weather, as does Raleigh. The interesting thing is Raleigh usually does not get snow. That's right, very rarely does it get snow. Charlotte will usually get snow before Raleigh does. And very interestingly, Charlotte usually gets snow on the northern half and not so much the southern half. Why? Well, it all has to do with things that are probably way above my pay grade. But if you take a look at what's going on with the jet streams, etc., the northern part of Charlotte obviously is farther north, and it actually has cooler air. And you'll see every time it snows, there'll be a split where it turns into like rainy sort of snow in the middle of Charlotte, and then usually it just rains on the lower quadrant. So Fort Mill, Rock Hill, you guys do not get snow. Not really, hardly at all. Actually, our last good snowstorm, which I would say actually shut everybody down for a full day, was 8 inches, and it was back in 2014, just to give you an idea. Now, Raleigh, on the other hand, hardly ever gets snow. In fact, if they do, it's a bit of a sprinkle, but usually they get it far less than Charlotte. Let's go to the flip side. Raleigh usually does get hurricane weather. Now, don't freak out. We're not in Florida. But they do usually get some of the rain and winds that come with hurricanes that do end up hitting the coast. By the time it gets so far inland, Charlotte usually does not feel any of the blow of that. In fact, the last time we had any kind of substantial impact was Hugo, which was, I believe, back in the 80s. So it's been a while. I'm not saying we're untouchable. I'm just saying that further east, you're going to have more of a blowback from wind and water when it comes to hurricanes. Either way, nothing to be scared of when it comes to weather. They're both completely reasonable. Now, here's some of the advantages of Raleigh over Charlotte. If you do like weekend adventures at the beach, you are only 2 hours from Wilmington. That's right, you pop the kids in the car, you can take a day trip to the beach. In fact, I used to. I'd pop my surfboard in the back of my car and drive out to go surfing for the day. And friends that live in Raleigh still do the same today. Charlotte, you're gonna have to plan a weekend trip because it's about 3.5 hours to get to the coast. But here's the cool thing. You can go to Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, or you can also go to Charleston, all in the same amount of time, 3.5 hours from Charlotte. So you do have options. So let's flip the script. What about the mountains? Well, here in North Carolina and Charlotte, we are about 2 hours from the mountains. I say the mountains, specifically Asheville, North Carolina, which I'm about to do another video on. And when it comes to that, you can take a nice day trip up to the mountains, see the Biltmore Estate, go for hikes in the Blue Ridge Parkway, take a drive. But if you're in Raleigh, yes, you're in for a little bit of an extra drive. 3.5 hours to 4, depending upon where you want to go. So it's a trade-off. Which one do you want? Now, the other thing I'll talk about, of course, is houses, right? So we talked a little bit about houses earlier, but it depends upon what kind of home you're looking for. Now, Raleigh is more limited to what they have, obviously because of population, space, etc. But what I would say is Charlotte has a lot of opportunity on those outskirt towns, whether you want a 2-bed, 1-bath, fully renovated in Gastonia, or maybe in, I don't know, Concord or Kannapolis, or you want a beautiful multi-million-dollar home down in Ballantyne. We have all of it, and it's all in a pretty easy to access location. When we go to Raleigh, as I said, there's so many offshoots of Raleigh and smaller towns that sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get to those locations. Everything is relative, especially if you're moving from an area that's already really populated by like California or New York. All this can seem really simple. So in a nutshell, which one's best? Well, I'll let you decide that. But what I can say is I live in Charlotte, I love Charlotte, and after spending 6 years in Raleigh, Charlotte's where I'm gonna stay. So this is Kayla Lindsay with eXp Realty. I hope this answered some of your questions, and most of it was my own opinion. So you can go ahead and form your own opinion on this from living in those areas, but hopefully this answered your questions. And whether it's 9 days or 90 days, whether you're moving across the country or just across town, feel free to give me a shout, either text, email, or set up a conversation through Zoom. Until next time, I look forward to showing you around town.